That's exciting. Okay. Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm one of the reference librarians here at Luria Library. And today we're going to know more about infographics. Unless, there it goes. Infographics are visual representations of information or data, and there are a lot of vocabulary words that people are associating with this topic right now. Sometimes you'll hear people discuss words like analytics, which would be graphs or charts related to data in their field. Sometimes people are calling them dashboards when they're live feeds of data on a website or something that's driven by changing data from a form. And infographics themselves are sometimes very static. It could be just a poster or a flyer that's in a paper format. They're also embedded often into websites and things like that, so they can be very interactive and very dynamic, constantly changing from their information sources. So you can see that there are a lot of different types and different ways to use them. And it involves a lot of different fields, which is exciting in terms of collaboration. So librarians are particularly interested in infographics because we deal with information, we deal with evaluating sources, we deal with citation. But also graphic designers are very interested in infographics as they design websites and things like that. Statisticians and people who study math are interested in infographics because of the way they present data. And you can see that there are just a lot of different types, including graphs, charts, lists, timelines, maps, flowcharts, even comic strips, which is very much more in the artistic realm, and different kinds of diagrams. This first infographic is really interesting. It talks a little bit about why infographics are important, and it's a great place to start with what we're going to focus on today. As we go through the PowerPoint, we're going to look at analyzing different infographics, so deciding what it is that we like about them, why we're drawn to them, specifically looking at the information and the credibility of the information to see if it fits our information purpose. We're going to spend some time looking at different data sources and how you can research information for infographics in a credible way. And then we're going to spend some time actually creating them and exploring some design tips for how to create them. One thing that happens with infographics is that there's often a hook. And the hook can be visual or it can be words. So the hook is not always the title, or it's not even a subtitle. In this infographic, the hook is very much the eye, and through design, even though we read all the different pieces of information, we're really drawn back into the center, which keeps us within the infographic and not from wandering off. The title's actually way down here. It's an infographic of infographics. Which I think is interesting, that it's a very non-traditional title location. The things I noticed about design is that the proportions are really divided with a line down the middle, and then you'll see boxes that on one side are larger and then are maybe cut down in half on the right, but it's really very balanced in terms of the way that the proportions are laid out. The box is slightly narrower at the top and slightly larger as we move down the page, and just a little bit askew in here, but still very, very balanced and using a consistent color palette. So I really liked the way it drew me in, and this is a pretty busy infographic, and it makes me think about why I would choose a busier or a more simple design. This one, because of the way it's designed, my eye still stays with it, even though it's very busy, and then I spend time going out into the exterior and reading a fact and then getting drawn back in. I'm going to click on the title so that we can go to see that in the actual infographic in the article that was in, at the bottom, down here in this tiny gray area, are all the sources that were listed for this infographic. So again, as I look at the purpose and as I begin to evaluate infographics, I find that for many of them, the sources are not listed. And for me, that puts the infographic more in an entertainment type of category than in a factual or educational type of category. And it's very interesting how few of them are actually cited. So that was just a good example of a really fun infographic to look at. Oh, here we go. Okay. When you begin to consider an infographic, the big question to ask yourself is, what is your story? What is the purpose or the message that you're trying to get across? And how can you really focus on just that so that it's accessible to anyone and everyone in a relatively short amount of time? And this infographic talks about why we need them. One thing that's really interesting for this one is that it has and everyone would rather read infographics, a blanket statement. So as I start to get into evaluating this one, again, my credibility whistle sort of went off. Was like, well, how can you back that up in everyone's statement, some kind of blanket statement? I really liked the layout. Again, how consistent and balanced the format is. But I also noted that this one particularly is missing citation. And so while they have all of these percentages lined up, I really have no way to be able to validate whether those are remotely accurate. So for me, this must be maybe an advertising piece, but not particularly to be used for education. So who is your audience? Again, as you're designing your story, you can look at your audience. Maybe as a marketing piece, they were thinking people were just going to buy into their site and not really check their facts. But the big question is, if I know my audience, how can I find credible research that they're going to believe? Because if you're going to spend the time to really design an interesting infographic, you want people to believe you and not just to be another pretty ad that's out there in the world. This infographic was actually designed here by Sean Flores, who's in the back of the room, and it talks about the web browsers that are used here in the library most. And so after you have your story and you know who your audience is going to be, the question is to think about your data and your audience and what kind of format is going to be best for them. What I really liked about this infographic is the lack of deep text. You can really tell by looking right down the middle. These icons represent the browsers that people recognize. You can clearly see the statistics, and the citation is at the bottom, so you know where the information came from. It's very clear the time frame. Infographics have been popular enough that it's very easy to find them now from 3, 4, even 5 years ago. And so if the data is going to be current, it's really nice to have a year on it or some indication if it's a live feed that this is, how often it's updated so that people know how to actually apply the information from your infographic. If you're doing it from work too, I also think it's great to think about how you can incorporate the colors and the logo of your particular business into it or your department. So again, that it's consistent with the marketing materials of your institution and is more likely to look professional and fit in with those other materials. The use of colors here, excellent, and also the balance of different fonts. Even though there are some fun fonts being used, they're very clear and legible. So to me, my eye does not tire looking at this infographic, and I really get the message quickly. Oh. Okay. So that question of what format to choose, and I have a whole bunch of different infographics here I'd like to share with you. The first one is interactive. Interactive is a little more high level. This is from Rolling Stone, and actually I have it loaded over here because it takes a minute to load. And it talks about the most popular albums of all time. It's a live feed off of a survey that Rolling Stone did. So for us here at City College, we have the Google Apps platform, and many departments or classes even use Google Forms, and you can actually send out a survey through Google Forms and have it live feed into your infographic. I know Flowchart will pretty simply live feed graphs from Google, and then many of the different template sites that we'll look at towards the end of the workshop. You can easily upload information from spreadsheets and Excel and things like that. But I liked the idea of live feed in terms of giving us an idea of what's possible as we begin to imagine what kind of story could we tell, and when do we want to tell it, and do we want it to be constantly updated? How are we going to design an infographic that can be used maybe more than once, or can be used ongoing and continue to draw relevant information to itself? Would it be an infographic that you would take a snapshot of at one time and take a snapshot of a year later and see how they're different and compare those? Things like that. So this one is very interactive because you can actually say, I really want to know more about the Who, and click there. Are you going to let me do this? Not today.
It's waiting.
Oh, it's just thinking at the top. And the same thing, you can go in by year. All of these years are interactive. So I was going into 1972 to see what exciting things happened during the year I was born. So a lot of businesses are using this type of interactivity to post a piece of information or a chart or an icon and have people click on it and actually go deeper into the story. Some of the workshops I've been to about marketing talk about your 1-minute message versus your 5-minute message and your 10-minute message. So when you first encounter someone, whether it's in an elevator or on the web, you will have a very short time frame to engage that person, and that is your most clear message to that person. And then if you end up getting them for a few more minutes, like they click into another place, you have a deeper level to be able to share your message or your story a little more deeply. So in terms of online interaction, graphic designers are using this to let people choose their own level of interaction, and then they can actually track within the website who went where and why, and what does that mean about their marketing tools and how people are using them. So it's pretty exciting, and for people who have high-level web design skills, I think the possibilities are really endless here. Okay. Maps, I really liked this one. Was another example of interactive as it moves. A little bit old, 1980 through 2008 at this point, but again, a heat map which shows sort of percentage or gradient variations on a map. And these were county election results showing shifts in various areas between Democratic and Republican county votes. Another totally different way to think about heat map here is through topography. So they do it with color saturation, but also the physical depth spikes show the topography of places where the voter centers were more concentrated in different areas. So again, one of my goals for this workshop is to simply begin to expand the mind about what is possible. So as you imagine your story, you can actually think, would a map or a graph or an icon or something where people click in or something where people print it and put it on a wall, how am I going to reach my audience best, and how can I do that? And then this particular information was taken from public voter information, which is available online. So they did also have their citations there. Timelines. This one I thought was really interesting. I just found it. It's really hard to see, but it's actually by the student, what did they call it? I'm going to have to make it bigger. It was like a student political organization, and their job, let's see if I can get it to be big enough that I can actually read it. The student Yeah, conventional affairs or governmental affairs programs. So they're trying to raise awareness and get students involved in thinking about politics and being a part of politics. And I thought, particularly for SBCC, for students to think about ways that they can actually use infographics to engage people in the things that they're interested in and in their organizations that they're working with on campus. This is a timeline, but it doesn't totally look like a timeline. You have your dates and you read it again, very balanced type of layout. You read it as you go down. And some, interesting quotes that represent both sides of the spectrum, which I thought was interesting. Again, we teach students in our classes to really think about information bias and perspective and how it's presented. And certainly that applies to infographics as people think about what is the sponsoring organization or person and the sources behind any piece of information, and what is the story they're telling or the information purpose really to educate me, or are they only telling me one side of the story? And so the way that we compare and contrast and use information, I think, can actually really give viewers confidence in the facts that we are delivering as they evaluate the information and say, this really isn't just an advertisement, or this isn't just promoting one side of the story. This is valuable information that I can use for critical thinking or for school. So I liked that this one was done by students. Okay, marketing. This has been my recent marketing experiment. This one is from Venngage, and it's a very simple template. What I'm finding with some of the infographics is that for people who don't have a ton of design experience, we've got about an hour and we need to put something out for a report or for an event, for whatever it is, and that using a template can really allow us to save time and let the sort of more professional designers set something up. However, every piece on the template is interchangeable, and so I liked their colors. One thing about this one is they used opposite colors on the color wheel, yellow and blue, so it has a very vibrant contrast. And I could go ahead and I used their fonts, just fill in the boxes. I chose some of my own icons here in the bubbles because theirs didn't really fit my theme, and tried to incorporate my SBCC logo at the bottom. But very, very quick and effective for a quick flyer. Again, there's no research here that needs to be cited. It's just a marketing flyer. One thing that I did find out the hard way from Venngage is after 30 days, they suspend your ability to download or email your graph to yourself, your infographic to yourself, in hopes that you would then pay $20 a month to buy in at a higher level. So really watch the terms and conditions of the free sites. Some of them do change your access after a month or so. Flowchart still allows you to download for free, which I liked. But again, just thinking about the long-term use of your infographic. Another thing that I learned from this, and then later read about in a blog online, was to save a copy of your infographic at the highest level DPI that you can, because you don't know in the future what size you might print it at or need it at. And so you may think it's just going to be a little post on your website, and then you decide to print a poster, and it's very hard to upscale in terms of the quality of your file, and yet it's much more simple to just save it as a smaller DPI, a smaller file. So to really think ahead about all of the possible uses, or if it might morph into something else in the future, and what you can do to preserve your access to your file.
Will you be able to give us a list of websites? And
yes. Yeah, towards the end of the slideshow, everyone will have about an hour to get on and to actually make your own infographic, and I'm hoping everyone can leave with an infographic as complete as it can be in an hour. Diagrams, the reason I chose this one was because of this word damaging. I think it's really important to think about the different uses of our infographic, and certainly it talks about what makes a good infographic. I want to see if I can get it to load all the way though. Are you gonna, there we go. So you have your data, your shareability, which we talked about, your design and your story, but the word damaging there really stood out to me. There were a couple of excellent infographics that I looked at to include in this slideshow, and sometimes they would have maybe 1 or 2 words that just, I didn't care for the language. And I just felt I couldn't use it in an academic setting. And I thought, here this person put all this time and energy and is trying to promote themselves as an infographic designer, and they chose 1 or 2 words that really limited the use of their infographic. And so I really thought for a few minutes about the types of language that are used in social media versus the types of language that are used in business and professional settings, and wanted to encourage people to really, you know, I thought, well, if we have students in the room, that might be something where they forget to think about language. Certainly cultural inclusivity and things like that are really important. And just to make sure that we're actually not offending people that we don't want to offend with the way that we put information together in our infographic. The other thing that I really like about infographics is that they're about critical thinking. They're about the synthesis of information and creating a new perspective. So it's often not that numbers are presented, but it's the way that numbers are analyzed to give you a new perspective on the topic that makes the infographic so clever and so engaging. And again, it's very easy to say hurtful things. It's very, you know, if you are talking about a particularly debatable topic, and to think about what audience am I trying to reach, and if it's a broad audience, how can I be inclusive and present data that is certainly engaging but doesn't put people off, that helps open people's minds. So I found a few of those out there and I was a little surprised. Okay, this one I thought students would think is interesting. It's a breakdown of average student budget. Fairly busy, but the sources are listed at the bottom, and there was some interesting discussion underneath this infographic about whether or not students thought it was accurate according to their personal profile. But a great way to look at how graphs and charts and icons and things can be used all together, and to think about how infographics can be used for department reports, statistics for an institution, and things like that. So again, a very broad range, all the way from a marketing poster maybe to an annual report or a budget report or something like that. This is an illustrated list by this book pal. And I thought this person did an excellent job, again, with use of color, balance of the text and the graphics and the layout. This one has a lot more descriptive text in it, so it just goes to show that you actually can use quite a bit of text if you need to in an infographic. And many of them are long, so the sort of 8.5 by 14 type of shape tends to be the way that many of them are designed. And again, use of actual data along with more descriptive types of words and icons. And again, the source is listed at the bottom. Another thing I've noticed, very few people, myself included, I don't think I had ever put my name on any of the infographics I had done. And this was literally the first one that I saw, where I started trying to cite the infographics for the PowerPoint, and I really struggled, even as a librarian, to try to figure out the actual authorship of many of these, because people will take them and repost them. And so you follow this wormhole of different sites and posting to figure out where the original one is. So if you have taken the time to create something original and to cite all of the other work that you've used in your infographic, remember to give yourself credit too, along with the date, so that people know when. Yes, ma'am?
Wouldn't your work be automatically copyrighted?
In terms of intellectual property, yes, it is your intellectual property, but whether or not a viewer knows to give you credit is why it would be great for your name to be somewhere on there. Again, if it's just, if a snapshot is taken of it and used, or if it's printed out and posted, if your name is actually on the infographic instead of in the related article, your name is not separated from your work, so someone would know to be able to give you work. And that actually is a great segue into our upcoming slides, where we're going to look at issues of copyright and intellectual property. The last one is a flowchart. Very, very popular right now in terms of infographics are these flowcharts where it shows, you know, a decision-making process or something that happens. And I thought students would really like this. We have one that tutors made at the reference and information desk that shows how to print in the library, because there are multiple steps and choices in the printing process. And so they made an infographic of it so students could glance at it. Okay, let me close a few tabs here, and we will move on. Okay, we talked about credible information sources. I brought this book with me from our collection, Data Visualizations. It has a whole chapter of data sources, government sources, statistics, census, things like that online, which I really liked, as well as another chapter on free and low-cost infographic sites. There were so many different sites that I researched that I really couldn't put them all into one PowerPoint, but there are many blogs, online articles, and certainly this book also that will talk about different choices if you really want to get in and find specialized information infographic sites. There are some sites that only do maps or only do graphs, or where you have to, download the software and upload your information from spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. And each site usually has helps that will help you figure out how to use them, and there are also a plethora of YouTube videos. Our campus will soon have access to lynda.com as a trial for the coming year. Lynda has incredible movies and things, modules on designing infographics also. Google Public Data I really recommend for data. It's an interesting kind of a one-stop shopping. Go back. Is this one gonna load for me? There it goes. No, not that one. Oh, this one, sorry. It has the census, Eurostat. Sometimes it's more challenging to find non-US focused stats here. So they have Eurostat, World Resources Institute, and some other different sources of information. And for many of these sites, you can find the information you want, download it as an Excel file, and then upload it into your infographic.
World Mapper is one of my favorites.
Oh, World Mapper.
.org. They have thousands of graphics, cartograms.
Right.
But behind all of them, you also can download the Excel data.
Oh, great.
Great resource.
Yeah, I've definitely found that in my own making of infographics, sometimes finding the hard data to be able to upload is the challenging part. Like, I have the story and I know how I want to present it, but then I have to find the information that I can put into a spreadsheet. Statista for some business information can be very interesting. We've had some students at the reference desk who are trying to do business plans and project where markets are going and market trends are going. And then, of course, Tableau. The college here does use Tableau, and the link will work with your pipeline password so that we have access. And so for college-related data, this is certainly a very interesting place to be able to get information, and it can also be downloaded into Excel spreadsheets. So you can go in here and look at attendance of your class, how many of your classes were canceled versus had full enrollment, student demographics, all kinds of different things. So very interesting, and again, able able to work with your pipeline username and password. We're not able to adjust any of these dashboards. They're all set by the college and Robert Else in institutional statistics. But if you needed more specific data than is here, you could certainly contact IR, and they would help you. But these are just for us to look at and to work with. Okay, so just to go with what you were saying about intellectual property, I really liked this infographic, and it talks about fair use in libraries and how we can use in education information. So again, just interesting. I'm finding a lot of government use of infographics, and this is from the Association of Research Libraries, to really help articulate to people how they can use information fairly, for their work. And then the thing that's fun is that I've noticed is that you'll see at the bottom, people are starting to use the Creative Commons iconography. And Creative Commons is a way that people can sort of copyright their information, not through the government, but through Creative Commons, and say how they want it to be shared. So do they want it to be public domain so that anybody can just use it? Or do they want it to be used but give them credit, or used with permission? So Creative Commons has a whole iconography about how things are labeled, and I've started to see this in many, many places. And their website is also linked here, and it talks about what they are and what their different licenses are, which is fun. I think they even, they have a list of all of their different ones. So give someone attribution, share and share alike. You can attribute, but you can't make money off of it. It's not commercial, all of that kind of stuff. But there is really a movement for people who are beginning to design things with the idea that it can be shared, more open source types of information. So if you particularly do want something special that you've designed to be shared in a certain way, you can actually register it through Creative Commons and use the icon, and then be more specific with your intention about how your work is being used. Okay, so fair use, these links are just to remind us that the college has articulated fair use for us, and we do have a fair use page here at the college. The same with copyright. They talk about copyright. So if you want to read more into these things, the information is there. And then here at the library, we have citation guides. They're listed here under the help menu at the top of the page, and we have citation guides that relate to the different areas of study. And so while I have not found a particularly articulated way that infographics are supposed to cite, I would say cite it in a way that best applies to your field, and it definitely does give credibility to be able to cite the information in your infographic. I personally use MLA in mine, and then if it's an interactive thing, it can be something that people link through to, or often it's just a little tiny bit at the bottom of the page and people can scroll down. But that way, if it is cut and paste or used in a way, people do have enough information that they can actually get to the specific source if they want to use it or fact check it. Okay, so now the really exciting part. These are the top 5 free infographic sites that I have found to be popularly used. There are many, many different sites, and some of them do specifically just focus on maps or this or that. So these are multi-use types of websites. You'll have to log on and make a profile there. And then again, just really be mindful of how the use access may change after 30 days. Again, Piktochart, I can still download my things from Piktochart that I've made. I just don't download them at a really high file level, unless I pay, for the access. Venngage took my privileges to download or email it all away after 30 days. That was frustrating. I haven't used Infogram easily in Canva for long enough to know how those user rights change, but certainly, you'll have to agree to some fine print as you create your profile. So just glance through it and see what they say. And then again, my design tips to remember: a title, a hook, which could be visual or verbal. Remember in the beginning with the big I, and the hook was really visual. To stick to one purpose so that it's very clear and you accomplish your purpose. To compare and contrast data, because really it's the analytical thinking or the synthesis of information that makes it more than just a redelivery of facts that came somewhere. It's the fact that you had a perspective or an insight and figured out how to use the data and the graphics to share that with other people. So it's definitely a critical thinking activity. Consider proportions. Most of the infographics that I was drawn to for this particular presentation had a pretty clear way that they were using proportions to balance the way that the eye is moving through the page and not to overwhelm the eye. Complementary colors and fonts. Again, the busier that the infographic gets, really complicated fonts can make it hard to intake the information. And font size can be important, and then giving credit to yourself and others. We do have a list of library books related to infographics, and every day I add more books to this list. And so we have ebooks, print books, all kinds of books on infographics, statistics, graphic design, graphs and charts, using Excel, using Tableau, all of these different types of things. And then again, I really liked this infographic because it just took that design process and sort of visualized it to think about your chart style, your font, your content. These are popular right now, the word clouds. So how are the big words going to take the most important ideas and push them out to your viewer? Especially if you're using any kinds of graphs or charts, a key is important so that people know what do the icons mean, what do the colors mean, what does the bar chart represent, and that they can really decode any information that you're including there. Colors, their iconography, different sections, and then of course your title or your hook. And with that said, there are a myriad of ways to continue studying infographics more deeply at Santa Barbara City College, and it's really a combination of all of these different areas of study. In the late spring, I will be teaching a longer class on infographics through the Career Skills Institute out at the Wake Center, and you can register for that through the Career Skills page. So if you study career skills, search career skills on the SBCC website. It's there. It's a non-credit class, and you can earn a digital badge for your resume if you're interested in that. But certainly graphic design, communication, stats, these classes are beginning to integrate more infographics into their studies. And then my work cited. We're going to post this so it's available online. And I did highlight one reference here to Beth Galloway. Sean and I recently took an infographics class that she taught through InfoPeople, and she said that we could post her resource list with credit. So it just has more articles, more information about design and things like that. So with that said, what I'm going to do is just go back to our list of popular infographic sites. And we're on good time. What I'd like to do is give you, 45 minutes or an hour to log on to one of these sites and start playing with whatever template you're interested in. And I can buzz around and help with any questions that you have. And just give you a chance to start one and think about if there's what kind of data you might want to be involved and where you might be able to find that data, or if it's more of a marketing piece, what kinds of icons and colors and things you would use. And then, you know, there's a lot of expertise here at the college and even in the room. So, yeah, so, yes.
Go back to the one where it says you should have these components. I want to think, oh, yeah, no, where your text.
Oh, mine, this
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Okay. So is that a good way to, after we pick a
Yeah,
tool to
yep.
think about it?
Yeah, just to think about, again, your title or your message, what's the hook going to be, your purpose, which is very much your story, and then how you're going to compare and contrast data. My infographic that I haven't quite found the information yet is I would like to visually represent online traffic to the library from inside the library or even on campus as opposed to off campus. So what would that tell us about our website, our library website, if we could really visualize how what the percentages and the ratios are from people who are using it from inside the building versus people are coming to us from other places on campus and from off campus. But I don't quite have that data yet, but I'm still visualizing it.
And do you have advice for us on the format matching the need, like an infographic versus a poster versus a, like I'm on a crypto chart now, and how
I think it's about the data. So the charts and the graphs are very much driven by raw data. Some spreadsheet with numbers that can be uploaded to create that visualization. Pie charts are a little bit easier because it doesn't have to be broken down into that many pieces. You might need just a few pieces of data and not a whole spreadsheet. But you know, a really a complicated heat map or something like that is going to need a whole lot of data behind it to be able to make that happen. So if you're more idea or fact driven, then it might be more of a graphic visualization, like an illustrated list or a timeline or a flow chart. And if it's really heavily numbers driven, it might be more of a chart graph type of thing. And many, as we saw, many of them do a little bit of both. Like the banned books one was excellent, where they had two little charts and then an illustrated list because they sort of wanted to touch both areas. Okay? All right, should I go back to the, just want to make sure, does everyone have a site that they have decided to, and you can look around at them if you want. And then if you have trouble finding the infographic, the bottom four, the infographic choices to me seemed fairly clear, but on Canva, I had to go to create design, and then the blog graphic was kind of an infographic, but infographic was like way down here. So to actually get their infographic template, you actually had to scroll down. It wasn't quite as clear where to start, and then you could choose one of their free. And you'll see most of the free websites are trying to sell themselves and promote the upgrade. So you just have to look for what tools are free and what aren't. For example, I think it was on Venngage, like you could get a US map for free, but if you wanted the California map, then they wanted you to pay for it. And incidentally, if you're not interested in using the templates, certainly you can use Microsoft Word and use the art features in there, and Excel to export graphs and things like that. So you can certainly build them on your own, just on a Word document or on in Google Drive. So you're not locked into these templates if their whole marketing pyramid is not what you were hoping for. Okay, I'm so excited everybody came, and I can move around to any slides that you're interested in or answer any questions. And we do have some design experts in the room, so.
I don't know if I'm an expert.